will be your host tonight for Unlock the Box, Solitary, Not Solitary. Hell is a very small place book discussion. I must tell you, it's going to be a fantastic discussion tonight. And first, I want you to know that we are live streaming today from Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. We would like for you to use the hashtags. We would like for you to use hashtag solitary, not solitary, as well as hashtag hell's a very small place. Follow along and comment. We care about what you say. Also, shout out to our co-sponsors, Unlock the Box, National Religious Campaign Against Torture, Center for Children's Law and Policy, the News Press Publishing, and Solitary Watch. Please put your comments or questions in the comment section on whatever platform you're watching us on. Once again, we'd love to know what you think. Tonight is going to be very interactive. And so, what I would like to do is just share with you why we are here tonight and why it's so important to have this discussion about this amazing book, Hell is a Very Small Place. October is the month where a lot of things are happening. And one thing in particular is Halloween. Many of us, as children, and still now as adults, we love to be horrified. But the reality is, in the United States, there are many houses of horrors called jails and prisons where individuals are locked away in cells. And we're talking about cells that only allow you, some of them, just a small window to look out of. That small window is the only window of hope that individuals have who are behind those walls. And so tonight, we will be bringing to you and to life the discussions about what happens in solitary. I can't say that solitary confinement is something that everyone knows about. And so, what I would like for you to know about solitary confinement is that if there is one thing that human beings need, it is human contact. And for a human being to be locked away without any human contact for 15 days or more, according to the United Nations, the brain begins to deteriorate. It is an atrocity against humanity to lock people away in cells. And not only is it an atrocity, it's something that we all have to help put a stop to. And so I say this that we have with us a wonderful group of individuals. And so we have with us Sarah, we have Sway, and we have Vanessa. And we will have this discussion. And once again, like I said, we would like for you to, read along and also get the book. We encourage you that, you can consider buying the book, and it's available on Amazon, Thrift Books, and Better World Books. And it's published by the New Press. Also, there is a reading guide available on Solitary Watch's website, and we'll put the link in the chat for you. And now, before we begin the discussion, I would like to prepare you for an amazing video. And this video will give those new people, those of you who are new to the idea of what solitary confinement is, it will give you a nice picture of why we're here and why it matters. And so this video is by an artist by the name of Molly Crabapple.
In July 2013, 30,000 state prisoners went on hunger strike in California. The strike lasted for 2 months. It was the second one since 2011. The prisoners were protesting solitary confinement, what many people consider to be a form of torture. In solitary, your world is a gray concrete box. You spend between 22 and 24 hours a day alone in your cell. Your bed is a concrete slab with a thin mattress. 3 times a week, guards shackle you and take you to the showers for 15 minutes. For exercise, you pace around another concrete box. Sometimes a bit of ceiling is uncovered. This is the only time you'll see the sky. As a punishment, the use of solitary confinement is often an arbitrary decision. Nearly 3,000 people are held in Pelican Bay State Prison in Crescent City, California. Over a third are in solitary, most of them because of quote-unquote gang affiliation. But that's a meaningless phrase. Gang affiliation might mean reading a book by a Black Panther, or drawing Aztec patterns, or even having a tattoo. But Pelican Bay isn't alone in this. Around the country, you can land in solitary for your art, your reading, your beliefs, your gender status, your sexual orientation, or your friends. Women have ended up in solitary after reporting being raped by guards. Transgender prisoners are often put in solitary just for being trans. Prisons say this is for their protection. There is no limit to how long someone can be held in solitary confinement, and very little evidence is needed to justify holding a person in solitary indefinitely. At Pelican Bay, hundreds of people have spent over a decade inside. According to the UN, 15 days in solitary confinement is torture that can cause permanent psychological damage. William Blake, who's been in solitary in a prison in New York State since 1988, said, "Dying couldn't take but a short time if you or the state were to kill me. In SHU, I have died 1,000 internal deaths." Solitary also enables abuse. The Dallas Six were inmates in Luzerne County. In 2009, they contacted human rights groups to complain about torture by guards. According to the Six, in the privacy of solitary, guards would starve prisoners, beat them, and strap them to restraint chairs for up to 18 hours at a time. In April 2010, guards beat and restrained a fellow prisoner. The Six covered their cell windows to draw the attention of a superior. In response, guards beat them bloody, and the prison charged them with rioting. The prison didn't explain how people can riot if they're locked alone in their cells. According to a lawyer for the Center for Constitutional Rights, prisoners in solitary are never granted parole. Because of this, a person sentenced to between 5 and 20 years can often spend the full 20 incarcerated. Prisoners' best hope for staying out of prison after release is maintaining bonds with loved ones while they're inside. But solitary destroys families. Those in solitary aren't even allowed contact visits. It was only after going on a brutal hunger strike that Pelican Bay inmate Gabriel Reyes got to hug his daughters. It had been 18 years. Many prisons even ban phone calls for those in solitary confinement. Personal letters may never be delivered. Books may be taken or withheld. This past November, U.S. officials told a United Nations committee that, quote, "There is no systematic use of solitary confinement in the United States." But as of 2013, this country was holding over 80,000 people in solitary confinement, some of whom were only 14 years old. Because of press and protests, there have been tiny reforms. Pelican Bay is reviewing the prisoners isolated because of gang affiliation. In September 2014, a memo by New York City's Correction Commissioner Joseph Ponte promised that Rikers Island would stop locking teens in solitary by the end of the year. But it's not enough. 80,000 humans remain alone in concrete boxes. When will they be out?
Gonna give you a moment. What a video. But I think it's time to really get this discussion on the road. And so I am going to pass it to Sarah Shord. She is a trauma-informed journalist, a playwright, amongst many other things. And so I'm going to go ahead on and let her introduce herself and get things started here. Sarah?
Thank you, Nafisa. It's amazing to be here, standing beside these other these giants, incredible organizers and survivors, not to mention, I imagine, all of the survivors and family members that are here with us on this Zoom. I want to honor you for showing up, for your presence here, for your strength and your vision. So I'll introduce the book, Hell is a Very Small Place. I'm one of the co-editors. I edited the book along with my two colleagues, Jean Casella and James Ridgway of Solitary Watch. The late James Ridgway, who I also want to honor, his incredible contribution. James was an investigative journalist that broke a lot of ground and uncovered a lot about solitary confinement. And Jim and Jean at Solitary Watch really kicked off a lot more visibility around this issue. And I've been working with the two of them for the last 10 years or so. James passed 2 years ago. So every time I speak about this issue, I honor him and his contribution. And so Hell is a Very Small Place is a collection of essays, of writings by people in solitary confinement that we collected all around the country. We got the widest swath of people as far as identity, age, ethnicity, and from different parts of this country. We traveled to prisons all across the country. And this was part of an investigation that I did that led to also a play that I wrote called The Box, which has now been toured across the country, and the End of Isolation tour, as legislative art to communities across the country that are trying to ban this practice. So Hell is a Very Small Place is full of brilliant writing, really writing, if more than anything else, talking about the holiday, Halloween, the fact that this is what we are evoking. Our society, we like to be scared of the boogeyman, right? We get a little thrill out of it, out of playing with that idea that there is an other that does harm. There is no boogeyman. The people that we lock in our prisons and jails are our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, and they are people that society has failed oftentimes again and again through poverty, systemic racism, lack of resources, lack of mental health treatment. So we're here to talk about not just the horror of solitary confinement, but the humanity of the tens of thousands of people that we force this torture on every day in this country. I came to this work through my own experience. I was tortured and held as a political hostage 12 years ago by the Iranian government. I was living in the Middle East and I was captured and held in solitary confinement for 410 days. And I came back to this country after living in the Middle East, working as a journalist. And I came back and I found that this practice is far more widespread in this country than any country in the world. It's used as a control mechanism that enables mass incarceration. It enables us to warehouse human beings that we have failed as a society, that we should be helping, that we should be rehabilitating and giving so many more resources to, and also giving the opportunity to be accountable for their actions if they have done harm. In prison, there's no chance of accountability. There's no justice. So by the book, I'm going to read from my introduction, and then you're also going to hear from our other guests on the panel tonight. Vanessa Ramos from Disability Rights California. The incredible work that they're doing is something everyone should look into on this call. They're the leaders in trying to pass a bill that would ban solitary confinement in California in alignment with the Mandela rules, which is the international standard on solitary confinement, that no one should be in except for a very last resort and for no longer than 2 weeks, 15 days, because anything more than that can actually cause permanent brain damage. It affects the frontal lobe, which is the part of our brain that helps us make good decisions. So this is not the place that people that need our help and are the most vulnerable inside our prisons should be put. You're also going to hear from Sway Pineda from the Center for Children's Law and Policy. He's also the co-host of an incredible youth podcast called Not in Isolation, The Voices of Youth. So you're going to get to hear from some amazing giants in the movement. And first, I'm going to read a little bit from the introduction that I wrote to Hell is a Very Small Place. And after I read, we're going to have a chance to discuss a little bit. And the same is going to go for Nafisa and Sway and Vanessa. There'll be a chance to hear from you all and to discuss what we are reading. So this is the introduction from Hell is a Very Small Place. At some point, you're going to snap. This might be after 1 week or 1 year, depending on how you're wired. At first, the scream ripping through your throat is a welcome release. You ball up your fists and pound on your cell door, vomiting every expletive you can think of. You damn the guards to hell, along with the system and every person who ever cursed your life. A guard yells at you to shut the fuck up. You tell him to fuck himself and scream louder, choking on your own snot and angry tears. After a while, you collapse, curl up on the hard floor of your cell, and enjoy a few of the best hours of sleep you've had in a very long time. When you open your eyes again, your system is immediately flooded by the same instinctual rage. You begin pounding on the steel door of your cell, but this time when you scream, no one shouts back. Hours later, when the lunch cart rumbles by, you find you've been skipped. You start up again, your fists raw, your knuckles chafed and bloody. When the guards do arrive, they come with tear gas, batons drawn. They come to make you choke on your screams. Days later, you've appeared to calm down, to settle in. Yet the scream doesn't stop. You try not to hear it as you brush your teeth. Take your meds. Force yourself to do push-ups. Or attempt to focus on reading a magazine. As long as you're stuck in this coffin, that silent scream becomes the backdrop of every moment of your waking life. It could last a month, a year, a decade, or the rest of your life, yet no one will ever hear it but you. I spent 410 days in solitary confinement while being held as a political hostage by the Iranian government from 2009 to 2011. Upon returning to the United States, I discovered that this draconian practice, antithetical to any pretense of rehabilitation, is used as a routine control mechanism in US prisons, far more extensively than any country in the world or any country in history. In solitary confinement, a gray, limitless ocean stretches out in front of and behind you, an emptiness and loneliness so all-encompassing, it threatens to erase you. Whether you're in that world a month, a year, or a decade, you experience the slow march of death. Day by day, you lose your connection to everything outside the prison walls, everything you once knew and everything you once were. People in solitary commit suicide at a much higher rate than any other incarcerated population. Some go visibly crazy, whipping their skin raw, eating their own feces, or cutting off their genitals. Others adjust, showing no outward signs of insanity. But what if the adaptation itself is proof of how effective this form of torture can be? What if the silent scream internalizes what's being done to you, making you identify with or even become your own torturer? So that's an excerpt from the introduction that I wrote for Hell is a Very Small Place. The rest of the essays are from people, many of which are still in solitary confinement in this country today as we sit here. So thank you for listening. I think we're going to have a little time for discussion if anyone else in the panel would like to share anything.
That was powerful, Sarah. For anyone who's experienced that type of horror, that description takes you back, and you relive it. And so for myself, and I'm sure the other participants, that it was, in a sense, reliving a trauma again. And so, I open that up for either Vanessa or Sway to chime in on that.
Yeah, I definitely commend you, Sarah, for, a lot of the people involved in this movement get involved because of their personal circumstances or unfortunate circumstances. And so to create something like this, be a part of creating something like this, that's, you know, thinking about incarceration, my navigation through it, um, like as a man or as a young man, I would say, um, sometimes I think about like my firsthand experience and how that helps me navigate why I'm a part of this movement. But oftentimes we don't think about the women. Sometimes there's children born in facilities, and so those voices definitely need to be echoed, as well, uplifted. And so for you to share pieces of your experience, and to use that into creating something that's powerful, that comes from a traumatic place. I wholeheartedly commend you for doing that, and also for allowing me to be here and just hear you. It's one thing to read it, but it's one thing to hear it.
Yeah, and thank you, Sway and Nafisa, for that. It's Sarah echoing, you know, our fellow panelists. Adjust your motherfucking crown, queen. Because you really brought that home. And like Sway was saying, a lot of our work is shaped through our own personal experience. And for me, hearing about what you experienced in Iran and knowing that it happens here in the US is so, it just moves me. It really shapes the work that I do. It encourages me to continue the fight forward, and the fight ahead. I really loved you calling out the othering that we do, right? Where it's them, they, the boogeyman, and it's like, no, bitch, like we become the system is the boogeyman, like it's a sham, and it really has me thinking about, at what point does someone stop being my neighbor, right? And may I reflect on the brilliance of your literature and your storytelling abilities and the collective power so that othering stops, as we move forward in peace. So thank you so, so much. Gracias.
Thank you, everybody. And that story is based on the incredible people that I met inside prisons in the U.S. It's not a literal thing. I wasn't tear gassed in prison, to be clear, but it happens all across this country. So that's my creative interpretation of what it's like in this country. But I'm here for this movement as an anti-racist, white abolitionist. I think it's really, really important for people that don't have direct contact with someone, don't have a loved one in prison, which is a lot of white communities or affluent communities that may think they're not affected by this system. No one in our society is not affected by this system because it dehumanizes all of us to have millions of people locked in cages. And every institution in our culture is affected by the disgrace of what we're doing to these millions of human beings locked in boxes. And I want to keep moving because I know we have a lot on this on the plate for today. But I'm going to throw it over to Nafisa. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on one more thing, we have to keep in mind we are talking about Halloween, and the fact that our children, some of them dress up as prisoners, right? But we must also look at the fact that there are children, 8-year-olds, in prisons, locked away, in solitary. That is horrendous. The latter part of September and the beginning of October marks Hispanic Heritage Month. And so we celebrate the achievements of Hispanic people in the United States and how they contributed to our culture. And so one of the people who we would love to highlight is our sister, Dolores Canales. She is one of the people who has helped shape history in the United States. She's helped lead the Pelican Bay hunger strike. leading to reform in California. She has been crucial. She's been a crucial part of anti-solitary. She is an advocate. And especially in California, she's like, we have our space. And when it comes down to the work that she's doing in California, it is phenomenal. She's also, pushing for the Mandela Bill, and we mentioned that early on. In New Jersey, we were able to have regulations for solitary confinement. We were the first to do that. But when we have people like Dolores, right, and Vanessa and Sway, who are at the helm and all over the country, who are pushing to abolish prisons and solitary confinement, we know that that spirit is something that will definitely reign victorious. And so, unfortunately, Dolores is not going to be joining us this evening. And I would have loved to have just been blessed to hear her share with us tonight. However, we have our sister Vanessa, with us, who is going to be able to not only speak to the issues of solitary confinement, but also shed more light on the work that she's doing, because, it is also National Mental Health Awareness. And so what we talk about when we discuss solitary confinement, we talk about trauma. And how do we deal with that trauma? And that's for individuals who have not only experienced solitary confinement, but also to family members who have had to experience a loved one living in solitary. So when we say that hell is a very small place, it truly is. And so I would like to pass it over to my sister, comrade, and yours, Vanessa Ramos.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much, Nafisa. It's just such an honor to share space. And Sway and Sarah, much love to you and to all who are joining us and who will watch this showing at a later time. My name again is Vanessa Ramos, and I proudly serve Disability Rights California. Disability Rights California is California's protection and advocacy agency. So we are here to represent disabled Californians. We advocate, we litigate, and the unit that I serve under my majestic leader, Eric Harris, Director of Public Policy, we're able to shift the minds and hearts through legislative moves. Disability rights absolutely is in partnership, in coalition with beautiful advocates like immigrant defense advocates and so many other amazing leaders in this space. I thank the team at Unlock the Box for putting the information on the Mandela Act in the chat, and for a link for our website, and a link to learn more about the Mandela Act. In solidarity with my fellows who may have disabilities, I would like to give you a very short visual description of myself for those who are blind or who have low sight. I have light brown skin. I'm wearing light makeup. I have black hair that's slicked back in a ponytail to my side. I'm wearing a black shirt, and I have a business coat that's gray. Behind me, interestingly enough, as fate would have it, is I'm inside of a jail currently that we are monitoring. So I am so behind me, there's a lot of activity that's blurred out. So that's just a little visual description of myself. I would like to also uplift, as Nafisa mentioned earlier, the importance of mental health awareness and Hispanic Heritage Month. When I think about mental health, I know that 40% of people in solitary have mental health challenges. They need support and not torture. We know that the stats are so high, knowing that people may not enter with a disability, but many times exit with disabilities. And when we are in the care of the state, right, we know that it is unfortunate and quite disgusting to be abusive to those whose care we are under. I can go on and on, I do want to get to my portion of the book where I, with great pride, get to read the story of Judith Vasquez, who is currently incarcerated in New Jersey. She is serving 30 years to life for first-degree murder, although she maintains her innocence. Vasquez spent 3 years in solitary confinement at the county jail before, during, and after her trial, without ever receiving an explanation or any due process. She also experienced several additional years in solitary during her time in the maximum security section of state prison after she was raped by a prison guard and forced to abort in her cell. In 2013, she was finally transferred to a minimum security section of the prison, though she speaks of having trouble adjusting to being out of solitary. Now 60 years old, Judith Vasquez has 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren, 2 of whom she has never met. And here you are. There are things that people use every day and take for granted. Things such as nature. Who would ever think that to be denied nature would be such a big deal? I had no open window. My window was about 4 inches wide and maybe 3 feet tall. My view consisted of just bricks and barbed wire. If I could see maybe a dime-sized piece of the sky, it was a lot. As time went by, I noticed a little plant growing from between the bricks. I would look at that plant every day. It was the only view of nature I had. Oh boy, did I love the plant. It was my buddy. It was my pal. I would watch the breeze blow it from side to side. I would close my eyes and pretend the wind was blowing across my face. I never thought I would crave nature so badly. As time passed, I started to resent the plant. I wanted to be the one feeling that breeze. One day, I couldn't take it anymore, so I grabbed a plastic garbage bag and sealed it around the window, covering it completely. I refused to look at that plant, enjoying the breeze I craved. Months went by, and the cell was dark all day long. One day, I decided I had to tear down the plastic bag. I felt I had to find a way to get air, so I began to scrape the rubber seal that held the window to the frame. I used my fingernails to scrape and scrape for days, weeks, and months. It got to a point that my fingernails began to bleed. They hurt so bad that I would cry, but I needed some air. I believe it took 6 months of scraping and bleeding before I finally made a tiny little hole. Wow. Wait. Sorry, I had to stop writing. My tears started to come down as I remember what I went through in that room. And at times, I feel it just passed and forgotten, but I guess not. I want to stop there. Her story continues, and I highly encourage you to get the book. And as I pause there, I want to uplift a comment that Sway mentioned about mothers and motherhood while incarcerated. And in this moment, as I'm reading this, I'm sharing with you that as a bisexual, bicultural mother who was incarcerated in solitary confinement, I can't help but to feel the torture that my fellow felt. I can't help while I'm in literally a jail. I'm in the sergeant's office, right? I can't help but to uplift the beauty and the resistance and the resilience of our community. I do stand in solidarity with Miss Vasquez, and I'd like to point out a very interesting point that I thought was just so magical is that look at how she enters a setting where, like many, you don't have to be incarcerated to understand the beauty of a plant, right? Nature is something that many of us could connect with. Notice how she enters that honoring the beauty of nature, craving the wind. And slowly, in that demonic setting, look at what she does. So I ask, is that Miss Vasquez's fault that she wanted to get a plastic bag and put over it? Or was that the system that she was in? Did the setting create that? And I want to do, a super special shout out to Ms. Dolores Canales that could not be here. But Mrs. Canales, thank you so much for leading this fight. And again, I stand in solidarity with so many of you. I do want to share a call to action for Disability Rights California, who is having a town hall with legislatures. And I know that the folks at Unlock the Box will put a link. Thank you, it's on October 31st. It's 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. Please check us out. We will be there moderating. And again, I thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share space with you today.
Once again, powerful. And I want to hear from Sway and Sarah about what you heard about Judith Vasquez. And so for me, just quickly, when you said her name, I could have passed out uh, because she's Judy to me. She's one of my sisters. She's one of the elders. She's one of the ones who, taught me, as they say, how to jail, right? And to know of the suffering. Those are not stories that we share while we're going through it. So to hear how she suffered, it hurts. It really does. And so I just want to hear from Sarah and Sway how you felt about that, how to be denied air, right?
Sway, do you want to start?
Yeah, it's just, I think about being incarcerated, for whatever it is that, that puts us in those conditions, and even this woman pleading her innocence. The inhumanity that you're immediately subject to upon entering that facility, right? Immediately, you are stripped of your name and given a booking number. And that's pretty much going to be your identity moving forward. And so the inhumanity starts upon entering that facility, and it progresses, and it gets more severe, it gets harsher. And to hear just like there's no justification, there's no excuse as to what this woman was subject to at the hands of the county, the state, the correction officers that violated her, and the mental state that she had to be in, day out, as she endured not only being in solitary, but then the treatment at the hands of the COs, and then, just having to abort in that, there's no amount of words that I can say that can justify, or even for myself, be able to relate to that. All I can do is like just, reflect and internalize, and then use that as these are the stories that as to why this form of torture needs to be completely erased. And that's just where my mind is looming. I don't know if y'all could see, but I'm like continuing to like adjust. I'll be in and out of the camera, just all this reflection, both personal and then what I'm hearing. I don't know anybody that would be able to sit just comfortably after hearing these stories, but this is reality. And this is oftentimes, these are oftentimes narratives that aren't allowed to be spoken, that aren't allowed to be grieved. And we're here to uplift those. We're here to hear these stories out, sit with them, digest them, and then speak about them, because these should be mainstream narratives.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're going to continue to do. Just make sure that these voices are continue to be uplifted. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I visited Judith she's at the Edna Mayhem facility in New Jersey, and we were able to have a contact visit. So I can remember hugging her, and she's one of the many people that I'd been writing her for months and months before I went to visit her. And by the way, interesting and amazing fact is that this facility is the same facility where Assata Shakur, the Black Panther that is still living in Cuba, was busted out of in the 70s by a bunch of white radical feminists, actually. So that's the Edna Mayhem facility. Yeah, Judith is one of the many people that, I expected her to just be falling apart, a mess after what she's been through. She made me smile. She gave me, strength. And I don't know the details of her case, but she is a victim. And the percentage of women, men as well, the percentage of men that are survivors of sexual violence and women is just astronomical in prison. And the number of women that are in for standing up to their abusers or defending their lives is astronomical. And I think that this is an important point. I come from a family of a lot of survivors, women that are survivors of domestic violence, including my mother. And this is like an important thing to note when you think about prison abolition. Yes, it's about shutting down prisons and jails, because the less people we have in prison and jail, the less people are going to be tortured by solitary confinement. And the vast majority of people don't need to be there, period. And the system is not serving even the ones that people that have done harm and need to be removed. The prison system is not serving them getting well and getting better. But anyone that is fighting for women's rights is an abolitionist, because we are making it so women like Judy never go to prison. Anyone that's a feminist is also a prison abolitionist and is reducing the prison system by addressing the core issue of toxic masculinity and violence against women.
Wow. Yes. Yes, exactly that, right? And also our children who are incarcerated, and protecting them. And so October is also National Youth Justice Action Month. And we have Sway, who will be able to speak to that. But, just to know that there is a movement to end youth incarceration lets you know just where we are today in the world, right? And to know that we have the Youth Justice Action Movement to champion that. We know that there is a fight, but I must say that if we're going to talk about ending incarceration, we have to talk about holding folks accountable, right? And so President Biden issued a proclamation at the beginning of October. And so I'd like to read a short excerpt, okay? During National Youth Justice Action Month, we recommit to transforming our juvenile justice system, shifting its focus from punishment to support, from the past to the future, by investing more in all children's health and well being. Our youth can build a foundation for full lives, and our whole country can benefit from their unlimited potential. Every child in America deserves a fair shot through good schools, safe communities, and equal opportunities. But some 36,000 young Americans remain confined in juvenile residential facilities, too often stuck in unsafe environments, facing adult charges or severe sentences, and living with untreated traumas that keep them from moving forward. Young people of color and young people with disabilities are disproportionately affected. We are not giving America's children the second chances they deserve. It is time to rethink our system in order to better reach the young people who need us most with guidance and support to keep them from coming in contact with the criminal justice system in the first place. Sway, can you talk to us about this, brother?
I'll do my best. So I'm Sway, pronouns he, him, his, 25 years old. Um, yeah, I'm a youth organizer, youth justice organizer. I primarily work in supporting young people's reentry at the local level, state level. Uh, and I think to encapsulate, why I'm here, what my role is in the movement, I think I definitely navigated the school to prison pipeline. Um, and I think now I'm doing my best to help eradicate that. I remember the first time ever being placed in custody, being placed in handcuffs. I was a sixth grader, and it was at the hands of a school resource officer for stealing from my school. I was poor. Um, my means of having access to resources was very limited, and so, out of a means of survival, that's kind of like one of the traits that I unfortunately picked up on, and then it led me in the hands of law enforcement. Luckily, that didn't result in me being placed in any facilities, but at 19, being a product of my circumstances surrounded by gang violence, trauma, um, I fell victim to that same cycle. And at 19, I was facing 23 years to life for my first um, time being arrested. And just having the ability to come home shortly after that, by the grace of whatever you want to call it, divine intervention, God, you know, or that was just my destiny to not be placed in or remain in custody. Um, I came home and then it took a little bit of, getting used to. I think the wake up call started with inside. But then I think I fully became aware of what I needed to do and how I needed to use my experience to help other folks in similar situation. Happened shortly after I came home. So since 2017 or 2018, I've been, an organizer working with formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated youth. Um, and just, seeing how most of our stories are very similar, how any of us can be susceptible to like the machine that is mass incarceration. Um, with every young person that I work with, I just help supporting, you know, their journey either in the institutions or coming home. Um, I think, and even being a part of this movement that's helping like highlight and ultimately working to end the use of solitary confinement. I'm a co-host for a podcast called Not in Isolation, Voices of Youth, and it primarily works on uplifting the voices of young people, um, who have lived through solitary confinement. Um, it's been recognized as like prisoners of war. It was a tactic to use to torture. But it's regularly used in our youth facilities, in our adult facilities, in our detention centers, and no one is exempt from that. Your age, your race, your sexuality, it's anybody can fall victim to it. Um, and so highlighting that reality is something that I try to um, work towards every day. Um, and yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and start off my reading as well. Um, it was titled "A Sentence Worse Than Death," and it highlights the story of William Blake. William Blake. William Blake is in his 29th year of solitary confinement, currently being served in the Special Housing Unit, or the SHU, at New York's Great Meadow Correctional Facility. Born and raised in upstate New York, he spent much of his youth in juvenile jails. In 1987, while in county court on a drug charge, Blake, then 23, grabbed a gun from a sheriff's deputy and in a thwarted attempt to escape, murdered one deputy and wounded another. He is now 52 years old and is serving a sentence of 77 years to life. Blake is one of the few people in New York held in administrative rather than disciplinary segregation, meaning he is considered a permanent risk to prison safety and is in isolation indefinitely, despite periodic poor formal reviews of his status. Prisoners call it the box. Prison authorities have euphemism dubbed it the Special Housing Unit, or SHU for short. In society, is known as solitary confinement. It is 23 hours a day locked down in a cell smaller than some closets. I've seen with 1 hour loaded to recreation, consisting of placement by oneself in a concrete enclosed yard, or in some prisons, a cage made of steel bars. There is nothing in a shoe yard but air. No TV, no balls to bounce, no games to play, no other inmates. Nothing. There is also very little allowed in a shoe cell. Three sets of plain white underwear, one pair of green pants, one green short sleeve button up shirt, one green sweatshirt, one pair of laceless footwear that I'll call sneakers for lack of better words, 10 books or magazines total, 20 pictures of the people you love, writing supplies, a bar of soap, toothbrush, and toothpaste, one deodorant stick, but no shampoo. That's it. No clothes of your own, only prison made. No food from commissary or packages, only three unappetizing meals a day handed to you through a narrow slot in your cell door. Your options as what you do to occupy your time in the shoe are scant, but there will be boredom aplenty. You probably think that you understand boredom, know how it feels, but really, you don't. What you call boredom would seem a whirlwind of activity for me. Choices so many that I'd likely be befuddled in trying to pick one over all the others. Life in the box is about an austere sameness that makes it difficult to tell one day from 1,000 others. Nothing much and nothing new ever happens to tell you if it's Monday or Friday, March or, March or September, 1987 or 2012. The world turns, technology advances, and things in the streets change and keep changing all the time. Not so in solitary confinement, however. I think I could keep going and I could keep painting a deeper picture, but I think to me that encapsulates enough. Um, you know, there's not much glory, there's not much glamour, there's not much excitement that happens in solitary confinement. When I was reading it, the stories that I've heard from young people, the stories that I read in this book, um, nothing falls short of again, to reiterate, torture, to be placed in, to be deprived of human contact, day in, day out. And I think, when I was reading out loud, it what you read is what it is, what you get. And I don't think there's any other way to dissect that further. Um, but yeah, I think that's my piece from the book. It's powerful from the first page to the end. Um, but I'll also open it up to oh, I think before that. Oh, actually, no. I'll open it up to this discussion. In the meantime, I gotta go plug in my laptop before it dies on me.
Thank you, Sway. Thank you so much. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, one of the things it brings up for me is Billy Blake one of the things that one of the problems that we encountered in making a selection for this book is that a really high percentage of people in solitary confinement are, legally speaking, illiterate. And it just gives you a glimpse at these are the people that society has truly failed. The people that were kicked out of school because of because of racist policies, were never given a chance to learn to read and write, and have ended up in the deep end of the system. And being tortured. So Billy is an example of someone who's a phenomenal writer. And one of the things I love about his writing is that he's representing the voices that we can't hear, that can't necessarily be represented in this book. He writes about the people that can't write about their own experience. So that is an act of solidarity that many of these authors in the book might have had privilege to some degree, mentoring, access to become such amazing writers, and they're representing the voiceless inside whose voices are even more suppressed than their own. So I admire that about Billy. I also just want to say, Sway, the other thing that comes up for me with the work that you do and your experience, something that I learned about recently in California, and I don't know if this is still happening, but I actually live with two dads here, and we're a family together. And one of their adopted sons was in the system growing up. He was in the foster care system, and he was put in solitary confinement when they couldn't find a foster care placement for him. They would put him in juvie because there was no family for him, and they would automatically put him in solitary because they said he was on a list of dangerous youth who he had never done anything wrong. He had never hurt anyone. And I thought I'd heard everything, but to imagine our youth that we should be caring for, giving a home to, we're torturing them in solitary confinement, is just, I was just wondering if you knew anything about that, if that was still happening in California.
I think within the recent years it has changed, but no, that was foster care youth. Oftentimes, when there wasn't a placement for them, would be either put in the hands of either probation, or some of them would just be funneled into the carceral system. But we saw there was oftentimes with youth in the U.S. and in California was very interesting because at one point status offenses, and for those who don't know, things that are illegal only because you're a minor, being out past curfew, not going to school, underage drinking or smoking, were subject enough to put you in the system. And we know that with the foster care system, a lot of it has been failing some of our youth, either being underfunded, lack of intentional care. And so some of our youth are even, some of the youth in the foster care system are, I would look at them as being on a fast track to incarceration. And unfortunately, that was the truth for a lot of young people. I think within the recent years, and a lot more emphasis on keeping youth out of incarceration in California. That reality has shifted, but again, within just a few years ago, that would have been something that we might have not found too uncommon.
I thank you. I thank you all. This has been a discussion that we can definitely continue speaking about, and we should, right? But the one thing that keeps ringing in my mind is the trauma and how we deal with trauma. And we're not just talking about the trauma of just going through it. We're also talking about, trauma that individuals like, yourselves and myself who are still in the work and you're still advocating and your boots on the ground. But what are you doing to take care of yourself, right? What kind of self-care are we doing? Because we can burn out. Clearly, we have lived through the hell, but there are still many people left there. Although we get legislation pushed, it's nothing without implementation. And so there are still practices of solitary confinement, but under new names. And we must be clear about that. And we must also look at the fact that when we talk about solitary confinement, for those of you who may be struggling with it or not, just think about what would happen if you locked your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your grandmother, your grandfather, your aunt, your uncle, you lock these people away in a room for days and fed them through a slot in the door and didn't allow them to go out. And if you wanted to let them go out, it may be once a week, if that, you'd go to jail. Automatically, you know that's not right. You can't do that. Well, if we know you can't do that, then why are we standing by allowing it to happen, right? And so, first, let's talk about self care. One of the things that we can do, there is a mental health toolkit. And so, we have Open MI, like Michigan, right? And so, it has a great mental health toolkit for you. Please check it out on their website. You can see it on the screen. And like I said, for those of us who just need to, just decompress, this is a great resource to look at. And once again, we must hold individuals accountable, and so President Biden and Vice President Harris, they promised to end the use of solitary confinement at the federal level if they were elected. And I do believe they were elected, right? Yet nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. So, what are we going to do about that? So, one thing that I say is let's hold them to their word. And so, let's get our phones out together and we're going to text, right? We're going to text Biden in all caps to 52886. Okay. And we're going to send this an email, and it's going to, we're going to tweet it out. This is necessary. And we should just do this together. I'm doing it now because this atrocity, these atrocious acts have to stop. And we're not talking about stop tomorrow. It needs to stop now. And so the call to action is for right now. If we start now, then we've already won. And so I want to ask each of our participants in one word, if you can just describe solitary confinement. And we urge our guests on whatever platform you're on, when you think of solitary confinement, from what you've heard, please put in one word that describes it. And so I'll start off, and I'm going to say diabolical. Sway?
Been my recurring word all day. Torture.
Sarah?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do two. Can I do two?
Absolutely. Dolores isn't with us, so in the spirit of our sister Dolores, too.
Thank you. Slow death.
Absolutely. And Vanessa?
Cruel. Inhumane.
Yes. And it's criminal. And it's gruesome.
Yes, it's gruesome. Yes.
And we must stop. So help us
Yes.
put a stop to it. Yes. And help us continue this work and also be a part of these discussions. And once again, please get the book. There's a lot you have yet to hear and read and know. And so thank you. We thank you for our guests who have, been commenting, and it's just wonderful for our participants to have been able to have this discussion. And we look forward to speaking with you again. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.